Good afternoon. Welcome to the How to Meet NFPA 1851 Compliance with Comprehensive PPE Checks webinar. Before we start, a few housekeeping rules. The audio is being broadcast over voice over internet protocol technology through your computer, speaker, or headset. Please make sure your speaker or headsets are turned on and the volume turned up. Audience microphones have been muted. If you experience any difficulties, please contact IFC support via the chat function on the top right or at webinars@ifc.org. In the upper right-hand corner of your screen, you will find the chat and Q&A menus. You're encouraged to share comments and submit questions for the speakers at that location. If the presenters have provided resource materials or links, you will find them in the handout section, which they have. Thanking our sponsor, this is Vector Solutions. My name is John Wolf. I'm with the International Association of Fire Chiefs and our Hazmat and Special Projects Center. I'll be your moderator and host for the next hour.
I appreciate it, John. My name is Robbie King, and I'm joined today with Matt Trons. Both Matt and I come from the fire service. We both rose through the ranks, with Matt also being a retired fire chief and a certified fire chief, which we absolutely love. The best thing about this is we were both clients of Vector Solutions prior to our retirement, and now we are solutions engineers with Vector Solutions. Basically, we can translate the technology into our language coming from the fire service. Today we have a whole bunch to talk about, but we want to begin with what is Vector Solutions? What do we offer? So Vector Solutions is a software company, software as a service company that provides focus in three broad areas. And the first one we want to talk to you about is in the training section, making sure all your folks are trained up to meet whatever certification levels or scope of work that you're trying to deliver, but also making it really easy to make sure that you're audit ready, whether it's for ISO or accreditation, being able to track all of those certifications, deliver on those policy and procedures, and more importantly, using a handheld device that everyone is already using to be able to capture hands-on training along those lines as well. The next section that we like to work within you all with is our prepared area. So the train is Target Solutions and Evaluations Plus. The prepare, we're going to be using Vector Check It and Vector Scheduling to making sure that your people are present when they're supposed to be. They can request their shifts off that they may need with Vector Scheduling, which is your time and attendance tool. And then with Vector Check It, we're going to make sure all those rig inspections, all those PPE inspections that we'll be talking about today have all been completed, and also keeping track of your fixed assets and your controlled substances as well, from cradle to grave with that one there. The other piece, and probably my second most important item that we're going to be talking about, is retain. We want to make sure you using Guardian tracking that once you have these people, you got them trained, you gave them the equipment to be there. After the call, that we have tools in place to make sure that we're going to keep them and keep them in a good place as well, so we can monitor all of those critical incidents that we've been going on. Having a tool in place to help with the performance and recognition, making sure that they're being recognized as they need to, but being able to see all of it in one spot. So being able to keep track of my exposures, whether it's been a structural fire control, a hazardous material one that, John, you have so much history in, but also making sure that we're able to be ready for that next call. So those are the three main areas with those 5 products: target solutions, evaluations plus, in the training section. Vector check it. We're going to be talking about an awful lot today with the assistance of Chief Shots in scheduling, in prepare, and guardian tracking for that retain area. So my questions here today for Matt is, I want to talk a little bit about how we meet NFPA 1851 with those comprehensive PPE checks. And that, to me, to meet those standards, you need to have a comprehensive program. So let's talk about today, Matt. Just give you a little heads up. We're going to talk about perform and track inspections. We'll dive into permissions that go along with all of that, managing our PPE inventory, tracking all the maintenance, and ensuring the accountability of the program is there with great record keeping. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Everybody is pretty familiar, sir, with tracking those items. But let's talk about those standards, if you don't mind.
Yeah. And when you think about this, you think about how costly our PPE, really is. And, one set or one ensemble is one thing, but now when you start to look at your entire agency, it's a large dollar value. Being able to have a program in place that tracks not only that you have these items, where they're located, who they're assigned to, and that they accurately get taken care of. That means inspecting them, repairing anything that happens to them, cleaning them at any time that they need to be cleaned. And I think back many years ago when I started in the fire service, and you go to a structure fire, and how often did you originally clean that gear? A lot of times it was come back, put it in the rack, and away you go till the next one. And I think now that's where we were at, and now where we're at today, and tying that into NFPA 1851 and even down into the Wildland series with 1877. I think about every time we were going to an incident, we were expected, and my expectation for my troops was come back and clean that gear. That may be a gross decon on the scene. That may be a detailed cleaning, and we were even working into trying to get those multiple sets of gear. How many agencies out there have 2 Nomex hoods, have 2 sets of turnout gear? So when you come back to quarters, you have that ability to get those items cleaned, get them back in service accordingly. But it's one thing to do it, but let's document it so that at any given time, when you look at the life cycle of that, it's all there, and it's showing the proof that you actually did it. So when you look at the NFPA series and what they're looking to track, you referenced the term cradle to grave when you're talking early on about the controlled substances, and it really ties it into the cradle to grave tracking of PPE when you think holistically about it, because we want to document all of the specifications. We want to document who has it at any given time, and that all the way around that wheel, all the way into the end. How did we dispose of it? Was it actually retired out? Did it get destroyed? And what transpired with that, ultimately leading into that centerpiece there of reporting.
You touched on that piece, those purchases. When I started in the fire service, I won't tell you how old the gear was. My first set of gear was, but when I became a chief officer, I was able to spread that initial cost over such a long period of time. And that's such a different use case today, especially with the inspections that go on to go in there. I mean, it really becomes critical to have all of those items and keeping track of those things. Can you talk a little bit more about tracking those inspections and such?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you think about that, we know firefighters, it's not always the easiest task. When you come down and you tell them, hey, I need you to go do this inspection, there's what happens with that inspection. It's one thing to have a pen and paper or somewhere. What happens when that gets lost along the way? And so being able to utilize technology, something we're on day in and day out, all day long. whether it's a tablet, a mobile device, the laptop out of the rig, being able to grab that and perform those PPE inspections right from the apparatus floor. Nobody wants to, and hopefully your agencies are protecting their quarters. Nobody wants to pull a set of turnout gear generally into an office where there's a desktop or a laptop. So being able to take this, grab that mobile device, and walk out into the apparatus floor and being able to complete those inspections right from that device that we're on very frequently throughout our day. When you think about those mobile app, having the ability to not only complete those inspections, but here in this view that you see, as a user logging in and seeing what is assigned. When we talk about whether that's one set of ensemble, and throughout today, Robbie, we're going to talk about all of the factors that play in, and we're not just checking a pair of pants, we're not just checking a coat, but looking holistically at that ensemble. But now you take that a step forward. If you are an agency that's tracking 2 sets of gear, or a set of wildland gear, a set of extrication gear, a set of structural gear, bringing that all together so that employee logs in, they see what's assigned to them. In this case, it's showing that, hey, you haven't checked your gear yet. It's due for that inspection, and it's showing me an overdue notice. But also giving the employee the tools in the toolbox at their fingertips. This particular code, it's assigned to me. I can log in. I can click on that item, being able to see all of the specifications as I'm doing that inspection, making sure that I have the right coat, making sure that I have the ability to know everything that's going on with that gear, because it is assigned to me. So I can look at that inspection history. I can look at the tickets that are associated. If was there maintenance done prior, maybe this was a set of turnout gear that was passed down to me from somebody else. Like you said, I was in a much similar situation. I think when my first set of turnout gear, it probably had 3 or 4 people before me. And what was the history? I never knew. Now being able to have resources, especially if you're replacing that gear in an appropriate time period, having the resources at your fingertips to be able to see that historical data, and also utilize those features right here at your fingertips. You see things like the serial number, the make and the model, but using that manufacturer barcode as well to use the mobile device's camera to be able to scan that. So you're not searching for that item, just hit that barcode, being able to pull that inventory item up right away, and then inspecting it. You'll see there at the bottom, it even shows you down to specifics of how often that inspection is due. Is it due by a certain date? You'll see when the last inspections were also completed. So it's transparency. You and I both know in the fire service, one of the biggest issues that we all are faced with is communication and that transparency to make sure that everybody is properly informed. And that's what the purpose behind the inspection process with the new PPE inspection program here with Check It. That's the focus, is transparency and communication, making sure in that first entry level, I'm opening that app up, I'm starting that inspection, being able to have the information right at my fingertips, so I'm not digging around and searching for those items. Now, once we start doing that inspection, Robbie, we know that we need to be able to document certain things. And in Vector Check It, we have worked comprehensively in the back end to come up with customized checklists that are specifically identified to the NFPA 1851 and NFPA 1877 standards. What areas are we looking at checking on specific items? So when you're looking at your ensemble here, and I'm on that mobile device, having that nice, easy bar there that says, hey, did this item pass or fail? What is expected to check? What is not? And what happens when I fail an item? Prompting you to take a picture, leave details, and create a work order automatically based on failed behaviors that we're going to talk about today, so that the proper information does get translated out to the appropriate parties. Being able to customize those inspections, you'll see at the top of the screen there, when I talked about that holistic approach, when I'm doing those inspections, the last thing any person wants to do, any firefighter out there wants to go in and open an inspection to do it on your coat. And then, okay, I got that done. Now I got to go to this other item and I've got to find that, and I've got to go to my helmet and do my inspection there. So being able to build all of those equipment pools, if you will. So when I'm looking at this, I can pick what coat, what pair of pants, what helmet, ear flaps, set of gloves, boots, etc. All of those items that your organization is looking to inspect in accordance to 1851 to make sure that we're doing our due diligence and taking care of our troops. In the unfortunate circumstances, if something does happen, in the risk and liability perspective, you want to have that accessibility to be able to go into a system, click a simple click of the mouse in there, being able to produce that information that says, hey, this is the level that we inspected this item. This was the frequency it got inspected. And here's all the data to back up and support that to protect the agency and the firefighters on the front line. So being able to customize those inspections, but link them together and build out customized pass-fail selection step and have detailed comments. So now if something does fail, that transparency is there. We're able to document that comment and move forward with it.
That was spot on. I think, even though we have the NFPA standard, man, like you were talking about, we all need to customize this to meet our own agency's needs. And Vector Check-It does such an amazing job of being able to do that while linking all of those items together, like you were talking about, especially being able to escalate those policies, the escalation policies of, hey, I didn't check this off, I get notified. Or if there's a failure in there, being able to take those things. Fantastic stuff there for us. I wanted to talk to you, though, more about the next side of things. Let's be honest. We have some really go-getters in the agencies. How do I handle or manage those permission levels? Is it just, hey, I'm the chief and you're an officer and you're a firefighter? Or how does all that part work within Vector Check-It?
When I think about the permissions, and having the complexity in the system to be able to break that down, who's responsible for your loose equipment or your small equipment in your organization, those items that have a quality attached to them. And we know that that's PPE, but we often also know that the people that are responsible in your organization, whether it's a logistics officer or a quartermaster, or whatever terminology you go by in your organization, we know that a lot of times those people are different than the people that are managing the equipment that's on the rigs. And so being able to separate those items and break it down to responsibilities and what are you responsible for internally? Maybe you are only responsible for that standardized equipment but you don't need to manage that PPE, or maybe you do need to do those inspections on the PPE, and you need full capability. Being able to customize those permission levels to take it to the next level. You have the specific items at your fingertips, and that way it allows you to gain access into that. You'll see here in this screen where it breaks that PPE separate from the standard equipment. So now as I look holistically in the equipment module of Vector Check-It, it gives me that ability to separate not only my PPE, but if I don't have the permissions to view standard equipment, I can break that down, as I'll show you here in a moment. Now, I want to pay focus to that because, why do we break these various equipment pools down in that permission to filter it one more step? It gives us that ability to be able to monitor and measure each of our items, but specifically to its need. So that's why we're separating all of the areas that we might track internally in our organization. If you're swapping ear flaps out, if you're swapping hoods out, if you have multiple sets of gear, taking that permission level and not just separating it from your traditional equipment, but also being able to filter that down into various equipment pools to make sure that it's easy to identify and find items internally in the system. You're not looking at a list a mile long. We're looking at each individual category and what equipment is associated with that particular topic. But like I said, in the event that maybe I'm the quartermaster in the organization and you're responsible for the loose equipment. I log in, I try to go to that standard equipment. It tells me, hey, access is denied. You don't have the permissions to manage that. I may still be able to go in and do equipment inspections. I may be able to go pull that saw off or check my air pack and be able to document that in an inspection. But as far as managing it and going in and adding, removing, deleting, whatever circumstances you need to do in that management side of the house, it gives that permission separation there to really enhance the accountability perspective internally in your organizations.
I tell you what, you made that seem really simple, and I know that it is simple, but I love that customization to make it detailed for your role, because you may have, as an example, with John being has a hazardous materials focus, he may only be a driver or whatever, but they have those additional responsibilities to manage that PPE. So making this not only customized to do our PPE inspections, but also our permission levels. That's fantastic with us. So the next area I was wanting to ask you a few more questions on is how do we manage our PPE within vector check-in? I mean, that's a tall list. I mean, if you're a small agency, maybe pretty simple. But as you get larger, there's many more pieces to keep track of. Can you help us out with that?
Yeah. So, Robbie, as I touched a little bit before, I think about PPE and you look at all of the equipment, everything we carry in our organization, all of our assets are important. And when you look at what that importance level is in a tiered approach, we have to take care of our people and we have to have turnout gear. And it goes back to the very beginning. We talked about that wheel and all the items we're tracking, making sure we know who's assigned what, making sure we track when it's cleaned and when it's repaired and when it's taken care of. But that, if you don't have that, if that piece of the program is missing, then we are putting our firefighters vulnerable to bad situations. We don't want that. Neither of us do. Nobody out there that's with us today. John doesn't want that. We want to make sure that we're all protecting our employees and having the proper equipment right at their fingertips. How do we do that? By being able to manage that inventory. What happens when things go missing? We easily identify them. Maybe you have a coat, and there's some agencies that are out there, and they build customized specs. And some agencies have a last name on the tail of the turnout code, as an example. But there's other agencies that don't. And what happens when that coat doesn't have a name on it? And maybe there was a name associated with the label, and that coat's changed hands 3 or 4 times since it was first purchased. Do you have an easily identifiable location in the system to be able to scan that code or be able to identify that inventory number, go into the system and identify whose code that actually is, rather than sitting there and searching around? No matter large, small, it doesn't matter. Nobody has time. You and I both know neither of us has time in our day to be able to do that. So it goes back to being able to take those permissions tied into those equipment pools, break all of that down to be more humanistic about it, being able to look at it in a streamlined approach and segregate all of those areas that we're trying to track. Like I said, for some agencies that may be focused solely on the 1851 with the structural gear, other agencies might be looking to track extrication gloves or even extrication coats if they have them assigned. I've even seen drilled down to the high visibility coats. They're expensive. Being able to track who has them, are they taken care of, are they maintained? And so we have that accountability built in here. But taking those equipment pools into the next level, being able to drop that menu down, being able to see some really brief information that's really going to go a long way for us. Being able to identify that inventory numbers first and foremost, but then taking that number, and I use that scenario of maybe that code doesn't have a last name on the tail. But being able to grab that inventory number, whether I'm scanning it with a mobile device and pulling that inventory item up, or I'm just looking at that inventory number and sitting down at the computer. But in that scenario, being able to take that coat C01-14 and tying it to Kevin, so I know instantaneously that that coat goes to him. Being able to use that also at the top of the screen with the filtering to be able to segregate that information down that much more. So when you get a large agency, maybe they have 1,000 sets of turnout gear. Being able to use that filtering, and they pull up that inventory number, they pull up a name or a serial number, and quickly identifying that by the search feature and that filtering at the top. But when we look at this and we look at all those specifications, again, I always reference back that, kind of that bag method, where we've been at and where we're at today and where we're going in the future. And I think about that overall topic with the specifications. I don't know about you, Robbie, in your career when you first got those, as you moved up and you started managing your PPE and all of those items, but traditionally, what happened? You got the specifications, you got the paperwork, and where did they go? They often got lost probably in a shuffle of a million other sheets of paper. Being able to take that, put all of that information in, whether you're looking at one set of turnout gear or 10 sets of turnout gear, and uploading those specifications. So now I can easily identify the make, the model, the purchase date, the cost. And when we get towards the end of today and talking about the data that we're getting back out of this, where this all becomes relevant. Because if we don't put the data in, we can't get the data back out of the system. If we take those sheets of paper and we throw them in the garbage, it's only as good as it is. It's in the garbage. We can't get that data back out when we need it most. And so being able to come in here, in this particular piece of gear, I can identify that this coat, it's in service. I can identify its purchase date, when it was put in service, how long it's expected to be good for, and all of the information in addition to that, right from here. And then take that into another step at the bottom where I can assign it. And I can track, in addition to that, all of the assignments that it's been. So if it went from Kevin and it got transferred to Matt, and then it went to the storage, and then it went to Robbie, and then it went back to Kevin, being able to track that holistically in the system so that in any given time, if there's a question that arises or something happens with that, we have that historical log on who was assigned that piece of equipment at any given time. When we talk about those inspections, though, and this goes back to the beginning of it, as I talked then about being able to collect this, and we want to be able to do an inspection on our turnout gear and an entire ensemble, not just one or two pieces, being able to customize those inspections right from that equipment pool, being able to determine internally here which equipment pools we're going to link together, and utilizing that enhanced scheduling. We know that generally a lot of times things can slip through the cracks very easily. So having that enhanced scheduling to identify when those inspections are due, having that notification process set in place, and giving the tools in the toolbox right at the fingertips to the end users, to those troops on the front line, so that they can complete those inspections. Like I said, in Vector Schedule or in Vector Check It, jumping ahead with the scheduling topic there, not only can we schedule it, but we can also customize those and grab resources that are pre-built, but gives us still the ability to tweak those to our agency. So you're not relying on Matt's program or Robbie's program, or Vector's program, but we can take what's already been built out there in accordance to 1851. And maybe we want to add some additional steps. Maybe we want to have some additional questions, customizing those inspections right from the equipment pools to continue managing and tracking all of that PPE in a complete and holistic environment. This is where we have the ability to take what's already customized and being able to incorporate those. Maybe I want to add an additional pass-fail question. But what happens to that pass-fail question when that item fails? I can determine in this particular step, does it just fail? Or what transpires? Is this a failed condition now? Hey, I've got a tear on my sleeve of my coat. What happens with that? Being able to document that, so now that failed condition is going to be routed in accordance to who's responsible in our agency internally to make sure that that gets rectified real time.
I tell you what, that was one of the things I always missed, was getting those real-time views of the number of equipment I had, the quantities, where they were at. That is critical for an agency today, not only just for budgeting purposes, but hey, you had a spike in call volumes. I had a couple of questions that came in, and I wanted just to interject those with you, Matt.
Yep.
When you were talking about doing these inspections, is there a mobile device? That was one of the questions. I know the answer, but I want to get your take on this.
Yeah, so the mobile device, it is available on Android and iOS products and gives you the ability to download that on a, like I said, a tablet or a cell phone, depending on what. Robbie and I always go back and forth because Robbie's an Android guy and I'm an Apple guy. But regardless, it works both ways, so you have no issues depending on your device that you use. So most certainly being able to leverage those inspections right on that mobile app, and it works seamlessly. Like I said, you can even leverage that mobile device's camera to not only scan those barcodes and QR codes into the system, being able to easily identify those pieces of PPE, but also what we're going to go and talk into next when it talks about tracking that maintenance and how that all ties together. So most certainly.
Yeah, and I appreciate you bringing it up, because that was the next question. Can I scan the barcode that's already in my code to pull that inspection? Or hey, I ripped this, they need to take it out of service. So hey, let's move on to maintenance tracking. I think you'll probably cover more of some of these other questions that are coming up.
Definitely. So, Robbie, when we talk about this entire topic, and we look at not only being able to track that inventory, but what happens on the back end, what happens when something does fail or something does break. It's inevitable. We're in an inherently dangerous profession. These sets of PPE and turnout gear, they're going into not friendly environments. We're not putting them into a nice, shiny, sunny environment where you're sitting on the beach. These are in nasty, superheated environments, as we all know, and it's inevitable that you're going to snag something, you're going to tear something, you're going to eventually get a thermal burn on that coat. But how do we not only get it repaired, but what's more importantly, how do we communicate that? And what does that communication tool look like? When we talked, just a few minutes ago about those failed behaviors and being able to go through those checklists and those inspections and identify what you internally feel is a failed behavior and is not a failed behavior. But what happens when you select an item that is a failed behavior? What happens when an item does fail? And being able to route that directly into our tickets module that allows you to create customized workflows. So maybe to do scheduled in repair and back in service doesn't meet your agency's needs. Maybe you only want a 3-step approach, or maybe you want a 5-step approach. It gives you that ability to customize that specifically to your agency. You'll see here that we have a tear in one of the pairs of pants, and it was routed. Now, what's cool about this, Robbie, is as we create this ticket, it's going to bring us into the screen where we can track not only cost and the repair status, which you see on the right-hand side there, but more importantly, the details and descriptions. So why did you create this ticket? Why did you fail this particular item? And being able to take that information that was given to us from the front line and even leveraging that mobile app, as I talked about before with those photos, taking a picture. Nothing better than a visualization of what failed in this particular item. But maybe there is something that got left in the weeds there. Maybe the description just isn't enough. And Robbie says, "Hey Matt, you said there's a tear in the lower left leg here, but I need some additional information." What generally happens? An email goes out, a text message. You wait until you see that person the next time face to face. But being able to pick up your mobile device, that mobile app, being able to log in here or from your computer, your desktop, and leave comments and feedback back and forth. You can communicate right there. So it's all part of the ticket. And then when this piece of equipment goes out for repair, we can even export that as a PDF and send that along with the gear. So now that the service provider that is going to be doing the repairs, they see the conversation, they see the picture, they see the details and the information that goes along with this ticket for complete transparency. But more importantly than that is that notification process, Robbie. Being able to customize those work groups, being able to say, hey, this piece of PPE failed, whatever step of the way, and it was a failed condition, who are we going to notify? Taking that thought process out of the hands of the firefighters and the company officers in the front line. All they have to do is complete the inspection, and in the back end of the platform, it's actually sending and routing that work order ticket directly to the right people. In this case, it's sending it to yourself and I, and we're getting not only a push notification on the mobile app, but we're also getting a email that's saying, hey, John created this work order for this tear and this pair of paints. And as you open that work order up, you're seeing all the details. You're seeing the description that John put in there. You're seeing the image that he attached through that mobile app, and it's all transparency from there. We can get in there, we can schedule that accordingly, move that along that workflow. So not only is the employees that are creating these tickets creating them and they're being routed and communicated to the right parties internally, but we also can log in here at any given time and we see the status. So as it goes from the to-do list to in repair, in this case, we're tracking it in a little different perspective, a different work group where we're tracking the cleaning process. So maybe somebody requests it, and then Robbie changes it over to scheduled, and Matt comes in at his next shift and he changes it and says, "Hey, I'm sending this out to be cleaned. We can't clean it internally. We need to send it to that ISP." But being able to log in here at any given time and see your equipment and what process or what course of action it is in along that process. And again, complete transparency, because we both know that that's the biggest struggle in the fire service. Hey, I sent my you sent my turnout gear out 2 weeks ago, and you told me you'd be in touch with me. I didn't hear anything back. Here it is. It's right at our fingertips. And the firefighters, the company officers, the people in the front line, they have full accessibility to see that real time, just as the quartermasters or those logistic officers see it on their side of the house as well.
That was great stuff. I love the being able to see everything like you did. My only question that came up during the conversation was, is the to-do, the scheduled, in repair, and back in service, are those columns editable just so they can have, other people can have different
Absolutely. So they're completely customizable. You can we know that every agency out there that we partner with, and I always reference partnering with because it's truly a partnership there. But every agency has different terminology that they go by. And we're not there to reinvent the wheel and tell you that your department's policies and terminology are not correct. We're there to give you a tool and a resource that you can take what your current process is, if you have one, and if you don't, we're there to guide you and help you build one. But that gives you the ability to go in there and customize that process to your agency. So maybe you do have a pen and paper process, if you will, right now, and you've had one ingrained in your organization, and your company officers, your firefighters are comfortable with that terminology and that process. Just mirror that in and build that in. And you even get to determine how long it stays in that back end service category. So you know what? Maybe I created a work order on my turnout gear, and next week I go on vacation and I'm gone for 2 weeks. And in that 2 week time period, it comes back in service, and I have the ability to go in there and see that it's back in service and it's going to stay there for a period of time that I've designated in the system, so that complete transparency again, and that it's customized to your agency, but it has that complete transparency so that it follows your program and not somebody else's.
I love it. So just a quick brief, custom inspections, custom permissions, custom managing of the inventory and tracking it. That's profound right there. That's a lot of uniqueness in there. I wanted to see if you could finish up today, and then we'll do the Q&A session, put you on the hot seat for sure during that time. But with all this customization, how do we hold the system accountable in making sure that the record keeping is following those procedures, if you don't mind?
You know, probably one of my favorite topics, because as important as it is to track the PPE, you'll always hear me, and I know you've heard me say this 100 times before, it's only as good as what we put into the system. You can have the best platform out there. If you're not putting the data in there, if you're not tracking and doing inspections and holding people accountable internally, then we're not getting that data back out of the system. And it's only affecting you at the end of it, because when it matters most, when you're going for budget, when you're going to produce a report because somebody may, or maybe they got hurt on the scene of an incident. If you don't have that information, they're documented, you're putting yourself vulnerable for more issues. And so being able to track it in a couple different perspectives we're going to talk about today. First and foremost is that PPE and equipment overview report that's in the dashboards of Vector Check-In. This gives you that ability to see an overview, exactly what it says. It's an overview of what's going on in your organization. I can filter this by location. So if you have multiple stations or you're tracking this in multiple different locations, I can track it down to specific equipment pools. So we talk about dividing those items up from your coat, your pants, your boots, gloves, ear flaps, helmet, etc. Being able to, do I want to look at one piece of equipment pool, or do I want to just filter all of my PPE equipment away from my standard equipment to identify that? And then being able to see current status. How many sets of turnout gear do I have that are out of service? How many sets of turnout gear do I have that are overdue for an inspection? And who are those assigned to, so that I can make those phone calls, I can send those emails and get that proper information. Hey, you know what, Robbie, I see that you haven't done your turnout gear inspection on both sets of turnout gear right now. Can we get that done in the next couple of days for us and help us out so that you're taken care of? And that goes a really long way. But what happens when I referenced budgets before? So that expiring equipment report. What happens when you get to the time of the year, the everybody's most favorite time of the year, when you got to sit down and punch numbers and figure out what you can and can't do for the next year. But having a tool in the toolbox, having a tool at your fingertips, if you will, that can break that down, and you can see those specific items, so that I can actually get true testamented data back out. I can see how many, next year I've got 5 sets of turnout gear that I've got to replace. I've got 4 helmets that I've got to replace, and seeing when it's coming due for expiration, or if it's already expired, and then tying that cost. What was the previous cost? How much did we spend, the last time we purchased these versus what is it going to cost this time? So you can effectively budget for these items moving forward. And you'll see here, it gives you that ability to track that in a graph. So if you just want a quick snapshot and you want to break that apart between your equipment pools, I can see how many sets based on expiration date tied to those date ranges. Or if I want to see it in a spreadsheet format, where I can export this out into an external source and manipulate that data if I need to. It gives you that process right at your fingertips, so you can get it in either fashion, whatever's comfortable for you. We talked about all of those inspections, and when I talked about it's only as good as what's put into the system, taking those inspection completion reports and being able to see, when did Robbie, when did Matt, when did John go in there and last do those inspections? Tying the equipment pool to the item ID, all the way down to the dates that those were completed. It's very, very high level data. This is just showing you that those inspections were actually complete. So let's say I've got 5 firefighters assigned to station 1, and I assign out our PPE inspections. I can easily come in here and say, you know what, on this particular date, only 2 inspections were completed, but there was 5 people working, and they each have 2 sets of turnout gear. So how did only 2 inspections get completed, but we should have had 10 inspections completed? And so it gives you that snapshot view to be able to go more detailed. And what I'm most excited about is that overall event log. So this is that holistic approach. So we show it to you in this perspective because maybe you're just trying to touch the surface and get some very vague and basic information. Maybe you need that detailed information. So we give it to you in both perspectives. So that way that no matter how you're trying to accomplish that, gives you that ability to see the equipment pool, the name of it, and all of the specifics. Not just was it an inspection completed, but what type of inspection? Was this your annual 1851 inspection? Was this a biannual inspection? Was this a monthly cleaning? Did you clean it after an incident? Being able to track all of those individuals separately so that you have that in-depth information in addition to everything. So I can run this report on a set of turnout gear, hypothetically, Robbie, and say, hey, as long as you put the information in, as long as the quartermasters or those logistics officers are tracking it, I can now come in here and filter down by that filtering system and see specifically Robbie did his inspection, he cleaned his gear, it went out for maintenance, it came back, it was reassigned, it got signed to the storeroom, it came back to Robbie, it got inspected again, and it's all in one event log report. And you'll see that how that populates right here in this spreadsheet. And then again, you can assign that and export that information directly right back out of the system.
You know, having those dashboards available really does make it critical. We don't want to have to search around, look for those things. So being able to go right to a dashboard, have it available at our fingertips really do make that impactful. You did a great job so far. All the feedback I've gotten so far has all been good, but I got a couple questions for you.
I
think there's always going to be questions in here. So one of the questions that came up, I think is really, I think everyone in the room can handle this, has had this happen before. How do you handle a ticket that, you know, ticket's been submitted, but it really wasn't justified? You know, we've all seen those things. Oh, my gear is blank, or my equipment is blank. And you go out there and look, and it's like it's not leaking oil. Your PPE gear is not damaged. Those kind of things. What's your best practice on that?
Yeah, great one. So just like I talked about before, how we can, you know, the user that's creating that ticket can leave details, take pictures, but it goes both directions. So that quartermaster, the administrator, whoever is responsible internally in your organization, whatever terminology you go by, they have the ability to go back in and leave that comment in there. Hey, this was repaired. Hey, I looked at this. I didn't, you know, this was not damaged. It's back in service. And, you know, as we drag and drop that across those different workflows in that particular ticket module, it allows me to drag that all the way back into back in service. So now it'll send that individual a notification and that complete transparency, because I can just drag that right back to back in service. But in addition to that, out of best practice is go in and leave that comment and give feedback back to the individual that created it on why you put it back in service, so that they know for the next time. And hopefully the next time they're not going to submit a work order ticket for something that's not going to need, you know, it's not necessarily an emergency. Maybe, you know, maybe what they thought was an emergency isn't truly an emergency based on the department standards. So it gives you that ability to have that transparency and use a little bit of education with it, but in addition, best practice to just have that communication between them and say, this is why it's back in service and it's been reassigned to you.
I love it. That's a good response as well. Got another question for you. You know, there's been, you know, since NFPA 1851 came out and all the pieces of it came out, we all know that beginning of every shift or before you use it, you got to inspect it. And then after the incident, you got to inspect it again. What are some of the recommendations that you've read or industry standards? How often are we doing? And I know the 2 advanced inspections a year on the gear. What's the other frequencies of some of those inspections that you're seeing or reading about?
Yeah, that's a great one. So you're 100% right. Whether you're doing that in that advanced inspection internally or you're sending it out to an ISP, what's important is that you do have to do those 2 annual inspections and advanced inspections. In addition to that, you're 100% right, Robbie. Every day you're coming in, and whether I will always revert back to it's the department standard. What kind of policies and procedures do you internally have laid out? There's agencies out there and there's processes out there where every morning they're still checking their gear. It's a basic inspection. You're still looking at it. You're still grabbing your gear off the rack. You're still walking to the apparatus. You're still hanging it up. And then through that process, through those actions, we're looking at certain things. You may not think it. The average firefighter may not realize it, but most certainly, if I hang my coat up on the grab rail of the engine and I see that there's a tear in my coat, it's going to stop me dead in my track. And I'm going to look to see what I can do to address that. Do I need a cranial work order? Is my reflective material hanging off and the stitching was torn because I went to a fire last day and snagged it on something? I'm going to notify somebody. And so those are what I would constitute as a basic inspection. Whether you have an inspection form built out, and that's where I said, it was starting to go before with its department policies and procedures, expectations of each internal organization. Do you have a basic inspection where you're telling your folks, hey, every day I want you to go through and do this quick inspection form so it's documented? Or is it just that visualization, but giving people the ability, hey, you know what, Robbie? Hey, Chief King, I just saw that my reflectors are hanging off my coat. I think I snagged it last day at that fire, and I need to get this repaired. And I created a work order ticket to send it to you. So whether you're putting those daily inspections in there, it goes back to that department policy and procedure and what internally is your policy. For me, what was important, I will just share one of my situations that we did. We started to develop and we think about the cancer risk reduction topics in a fire service. And I referenced early on how many times we, would not wash our turnout gear and how that coincides. We focused on 1851, but really to talk about taking care of our firefighters and having defined programs in place in addition to the 1851 standard to make sure that these items are taken care of, making sure we're taking care of our people in our front line, and having that defined approach. So for me, we would do our 2 advanced inspections a year, but then we also had a pretty regimented cleaning inspection. So as you come back from a fire, or if you did your gear cleaning once a month, based on our policies and procedures internally, you were documenting that and it was logged in Vector Check It so that there was complete transparency. And even though we weren't doing, we were just doing a very basic visual daily inspection when you walked on into the apparatus floor, we took that into a different perspective, and we use that cleaning as a more frequent inspection process where we were truly documenting.
Yeah, spot on. I agree with you. I appreciate that one. That's a great answer. Got one last question for you. So if you're still on, love that you're on. Just get those questions in while we still have the expert on, and that's Matt Schrantz, the expert. The next question I got for you is, having multiple stations with PPE officers assigned to each, will the system know how to separate them between each of those stations for inventory purposes? I think I know the answer, but I'm glad you're on to handle these kind of things. Go ahead.
Yeah, so you have the ability to have customized fields in there, but where you can ask certain questions and then filter in the equipment pools by specific items. So again, it's as advanced or as basic as you really truly want to make it, but being able to pull those items apart. If you're trying to tag it by specific locations, just building that customized field. And you can even utilize the storeroom. So we talked a lot about what's assigned to people today, Robbie, right? And what we did not spend a lot of time is, what about all the pieces of PPE that are in our spare inventory? Being able to also track those into a location as well, and that being the storeroom or multiple storerooms. So it really goes, you know, you can really get a much deeper than we talked about today, just in that location realm of it, is being able to use the filtering at the top of the equipment pools to filter those specific items.
Great answer. I appreciate that one there. There's no other questions that came in, but there's a couple more things I just wanted to close this up with before we turn this back over to John. But I'm so excited that you and I are going to be at FRI. I cannot wait to be there in Kansas City with everyone. We're going to be in booth 2235. Love to spend more time hearing how your agency is meeting those 1851 requirements, and maybe we can help out in that area with you. But in the meantime, you know, that's next month. We want to engage with you now. So the best way to get to us is go to vectorsolutions.com. And that is the easiest and fastest way to get some follow-up information from us. If not, give us a call, 1-800-840-8048. That's a lot of 8s and 4s and 0s, Matt. I'm not sure if I get that screwed up or not, but 1-800-840-8048. And of course, you can always email us at updates.ps@vectorsolutions.com, and we can get you some assistance. But either way, come to FRI so we can have a great time with you. Again, that's booth number 2235 to see Matt in person and get your photo with him as well.
And Robbie, I only challenge you to say that phone number 10 times in a row. It's a little harder than the booth number. So, no, Robbie, it had a pleasure as always to spend some time with you today before we take it back to John. And I second what Robbie's saying. Come by and see us at FRI. And when I break the camera, you can take your picture with Robbie. So that deal is on. But I appreciate everybody's opportunity to spend with us today and just hear what we have coming from Vector Solutions and how we can help support our brothers and sisters on the front line out there in a fire service. You know, and there's nothing more important to that. So appreciate everybody out there hanging in with us and spending some time today. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks, John.
Hey, Robbie and Matt, it's Nan. I'm going to go ahead and close us out. So thanks again to our sponsor, Vector Solutions, for our wonderful presentation today. We appreciate your time, and thank you to everyone for joining us this afternoon. Just a couple of upcoming events to make note of for the IAFC. All of these, you'll find details on the IAFC.org website. Of course, most importantly is FRI coming up, as they mentioned, in Kansas City. So please join us for that. You will receive very shortly a link to the recording of today's presentation and a survey. We appreciate you taking just a minute to let us know how we did and give us any feedback. And we look forward to seeing you on our next presentation. So everyone have a great afternoon. And thanks again, gentlemen.
Thank you, ma'am.
Take care.